Every woman will experience the menopausal transition differently. And today I'm chatting with menopause expert Clarissa Kristjansson from the Thriving Through Menopause podcast. We chat about her personal experience with anxiety during her menopausal transition and how she rediscovered herself and transformed her life with mindfulness techniques. I'm sure you are going to absolutely love her. So let's move on to the episode. You're listening to Menopause Natural Solutions, episode 105, Perimenopausal Anxiety with Clarissa Kristjansson. Welcome to Menopause Natural Solutions, your podcast for all things perimenopause, menopause and beyond. Stay tuned as your host, Naturopath Jennifer Harrington, explains how to use natural therapies to find your ultimate health and happiness during your transition. So today, ladies, I have such a treat for you. I have two menopause specialists that are just going to be having a conversation, and you get to be the fly on the wall. Lucky you. So today I'm joined by Clarissa Kristjansson. Hello.
Hello, Jen. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. Now, the other awesome thing about today, as my listeners are aware, I'm a perimenopausal woman. I'm 6-7 years into the transition. I haven't made it out the other end. So today, having Clarissa come and join us, she has actually made it out the other end, and she's living proof that there is life on the other side. So I'm so grateful to have you here today, Clarissa, to chat with us. Would you mind telling me how the menopausal transition was for you?
I would have said that it was very challenging, and I was completely unaware of the fact that I was in perimenopause because, like you said, I'm on the other side. I am about 8 years postmenopausal now. So we're going back 16, 17 years. That word perimenopause was not in anybody's vocabulary. And though I went to the doctor, that was never mentioned.
It doesn't surprise me. We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go, but it must be so rewarding to sit back and see that things have changed.
Well, exactly. And I think just seeing the level of conversation, the options that are appearing for women is incredibly heartening. And I'm actually really happy to be part of that conversation.
Well, that's one of the reasons why you're here today. So apart from saying the transition was challenging for you, what was the main thing that was going on for you at the time?
Well, I think the biggest thing was anxiety, and that I struggled to the point that it showed. If I'm really open and honest, I think I would have said I was a high-functioning anxiety sufferer all my life. But the difference was that I could manage that. I could breeze through it. I could be really good, go, do lots of things and never address it fully. And when I became in the middle of my perimenopause not well, it was the anxiety that surfaced. It surfaced at work. It surfaced with friends, in relationships. I was unable to function properly, and it would come out in ways that was painful for me and that often elicited a response from other people that was not very kind, is what I would say.
I'm really sorry that was your experience. That doesn't sound like a fun experience at all. And how long would you say this was a struggle for you?
I would have said in the early phases of perimenopause, I was having more heavy periods, which I kind of breezed over or brushed over. I would have said that probably that lasted about 5 years, until it really resulted in a panic attack at work. And then for me, that was the tipping point, that I knew that I couldn't continue to think I was okay. And I began to seek a different path, to seek more help.
So what path did you start seeking?
Well, to be honest, I took the path of mindfulness. And then it happened because this attack happened at work in front of a very senior person who looked at me and said, and I couldn't breathe. That was the thing, because a panic attack just builds up and builds up till you actually, you're breathless. You're lost the focus of what you're going to say. And he said, maybe you shouldn't run up the stairs to get back to the office after lunch, and just turned and walked back into the office. And I was devastated. I went downstairs and I cried in the lobby. And that was in Sydney, on Clarence Street in Sydney, which if you're Australian, you'll know where it is, right in the heart of the CBD. And there I had a moment where I remembered somebody's name. And it sounds very incredulous when you say it now, but I'd met this woman in a meeting, nothing to do with mindfulness, but there was something about her, and her name came to mind. And I thought, what is it about her? And I went to my desk and I Googled her, and I found that she was a trainer with Open Ground. Now, if you're an Australian, you know Open Ground is the foremost mindfulness training and group of people, shall we say, who work in this space in Australia. And I looked and I said, gosh, they've got a course starting here. This looks right for me. And it was in the next suburb. I lived in Bondi and I went to Waverley. And that was where my journey began, in an MBSR class in a small psychotherapy set of offices. And I started my journey there. And I began first and foremost to realize that I wasn't the only person that had these experiences, that there were other people like me who wanted something different for their life. And there was a gentle, open, warm-hearted space here where I could allow this anxiety to be shared and to be held in good space and not judged.
You were so lucky that you found it. Then I'm sure that there's women out there who are still searching to find something. And that's why you and I do what we do, why we have podcasts to educate and to let women know there are other options. And if you're out there struggling, please do not struggle alone. I don't mind if you reach out to Clarissa or myself or a family member or a friend, but reach out to somebody, because this doesn't need to be your reality.
No, and you're not broken and you're not crazy. That you are just a human being that has an emotion that has many roots to it, is what I would say. Those roots can be, as mine were, grounded in a difficult childhood, but that when we go through such a big hormonal change as we do in perimenopause, we are much more sensitive to our emotions. And therefore, we will respond in ways that are, very challenging for ourselves. It's the pain it plays back onto us that is worse. So in other people, we have to learn not to bother about their reactions. So that's not easy to do. But we start to learn that if that's you, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You're being the best you can be in this moment. But that there are some habits or responses that you have that may not be working for you. And those are the ones that you can change.
So with your discovery of mindfulness, what were some of your favorite techniques or some of the techniques you found most beneficial?
For me, some of the things that I found most beneficial was actually to learn to make space, to stop and create what I would now say is psychological detachment from my thoughts. Learning to, as I say to my clients, look at your thoughts, not from them. And that sounds very simple. And principle it is, in practice, of course, it's not. But what I tend to do with people is start small. Could you take 1 minute just to stop somewhere in your day and give yourself a break. You can sometimes listen to very slow music. So you don't have to meditate if that's hard, and that can be very hard initially. But how about putting on some very slow music for 1 minute? You can do it in the office. No one notices if you're back in the office now, post-pandemic. Nobody notices if you put on your headphones and listen to slow music, and it will bring your system down. Maybe you could do some gentle movements. There are lots of very small, minor, mindful movements. I like those too, because they're easier than sitting. If you think about little Qigong, if you're familiar with Qigong movements, they're very small sometimes. They're very slow, but you're helping your system adjust from all the twirling in your head and your head dominating. You're back into your body, and you're bringing your nervous system back into balance. So very small things can make a huge difference to start with.
I agree. So when we're looking at where you start, so these really small steps, they don't need to take a long time. I'm assuming that once you've got the minute, then you're trying to expand to maybe finding 5 minutes in your day, maybe finding 10 minutes and working from there. What is the ultimate goal? Like, what are we working towards?
I think what we're working towards actually is to be mindful in our daily lives. We are not really working towards a meditation practice per se, where you sit on the mat. That's a different thing. To be a meditator is a deliberate thing that can be highly, highly beneficial for you. But it requires practice and patience, and the support of a group is what I would say there as well, to keep us on track. What we're trying to do is to live mindfully, and that's what I try to achieve with my clients, that they're a little bit more tuned in to their own bodies, so that instead of overriding menopausal symptoms, as we love to do, well, fine, I'm going to take medication, whatever that is. And I'm not anti-medication. It has its place, but it's not instead of listening to our own body, because maybe your body is telling you, I need to rest. Your body may be telling you, actually, I need to drink more water. It may be telling you that certain foods are not agreeing with you at this time of life. And Jen is smiling here, I can see as we talk, because those things may not be what your body is able to process. We come into a relationship with what's going on. If we have pain, and there are women that I work with who have really quite extreme gynecological issues, as endometriosis, fibromyalgia, mindfulness can bring them into a different relationship with that pain, where we're not pressing it away, but we're meeting and moving into it. And seeing that in our experience, we have what I call a fluidity, whether that's our emotions or our pain, there's a fluidity, and learning to listen to the body's rhythms and being in tune with that allows us to see that we are not our pain, we're not our menopausal symptoms, they're just part of the flow of where we are. And then I suppose it's being able to manage this overbusy mind. The mind, I
think we're all guilty of that.
I think we are. But we live in a very noisy world. We live in a very noisy world where there is a tremendous amount of pinging and things coming at us, that we are very easily led to build up stories about ourselves that are not true. We have thoughts we have to question. And part of mindfulness is about being able to create that mindful gap that says, is that really true? Or is it just a thought? And how would I like to act on it? So that we become more responsive rather than reactive. And the aim of being in touch with our own bodies and having a little bit of management around all our thoughts is that we gain perspective on the total perimenopausal journey. That's the ultimate goal, is to live mindfully and have a perspective, a kind perspective, that this is a time in our life, it's not our whole life, and that we can find ways to both self-regulate and co-regulate to go through that. And what mindfulness does is it allows us to live mindfully and have the capacity to do that in our lives.
Well said. So I quite often speak to women about breathing techniques and particularly about paced respiration, because a lot of women don't realize that when they're stressed or when they're anxious, they automatically start breathing fast. Or if they were to just check in with their breath and they can slow it down. Most people breathe 12 breaths a minute. And if we can slow this down to 6 breaths a minute, which is just the count of 5 on an inhalation and the count of 5 of an exhalation, then that can really reset the nervous system, bring them back, calm them down. And I just want to point out that I do actually have a video on my YouTube channel if anyone wants to go and find out some more about paced respiration. But Clarissa, do you use a lot of breath work in what you do?
I do that. I use a lot of box breathing techniques, which is similar to what you're talking about in paced respiration. I think there are some nice pranayamic breathing techniques that you can learn as well, so that you have some regulation around the breath. I tend to find that if I work with people, it depends where they are. If a lot of my clients will be anxiety sufferers, I look at where they are on that anxiety scale, because for some people, starting with breathing can be difficult for them, because it means them to focus on the breath. And if they're already breathing very tightly, they might find that that can bring on them to feel more anxious. But it, obviously, for most people who don't have a history of anxiety and trauma, then breathing techniques are a wonderful way to shift from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. I use breathing techniques to help people to sleep better. And it definitely is slow breathing is a way to bring yourself into a restful space. And the reason breathing is so good at perimenopause years is obviously we have lowered progesterone levels, which is our natural buffer to stress. And that breathing techniques is one way, among a host of others, that we can help ourselves to overcome something that is just naturally a change in perimenopause. So I think it's finding a breathing technique that works for you. It might be very slow, as you said, very, very slow. Yeah. And I love the Life is Breath work from Ed Harold, who is a American breath coach. He's a former sort of head of yoga at Kripalu Center. And he is all about being able to breathe about 2 or 3 breaths a minute. And I've tried that, and that is and in Australia, Shankar Dev also does a lot of very beautiful. He's a doctor and a yogic teacher, and he has some beautiful breathing work in his areas. And I've followed some of the things that he teaches too there. But breath and being able to use your breath proactively is very, very important for all of us, whether we're in perimenopause or not. Actually, because it's a very quick and free way to balance our nervous systems.
So if we were to look at sort of a daily routine, do you have any daily mindful routines that you do yourself?
I do. So for me, I start my morning meditating. Now, I actually am part of a bigger group of people, and we meditate at 8 o'clock in the morning, my time here in Europe, at 5 o'clock in Sydney. And we join a group and we sit silently for 40 minutes. I mean, that's not for everybody, and I appreciate that that's not everybody's routine, but it is mine. And it helps me to anchor my day. I also like to get out into nature. And nature for all of us is a free way to connect to ourselves. It's got calming, healing properties that we now know is both to do with the fact that green is a color we love as humans, and that nature puts out chemicals from trees and plants that are good for us from a mental and physical perspective. And I don't take my phone with me.
I was going to ask you, do you take your shoes with you?
Sometimes, well, it's cold here in Sweden, so yes, I do. And sometimes I have my ice studs in if it's very cold. But every day, it doesn't matter what the weather is like. I have a dog, and we walk about 3 to 4 kilometers every day. And it's a time when she stops to have a sniff. I have a chance to look around. She stops a lot, by the way, but I have a chance to look around. And in those moments, we see little things. And if you can afford yourself that, do that. Look around, even if your walk is 15 minutes in a park or around your garden during lunchtime, you'll see things, notice things that are good and positive. And that will help you to have more positive thoughts than negative thoughts, because you're rewiring your brain to look for the good. So a walk is part of that. And then in the evenings, I try and give myself time to wind down. And that's part of my routine to help me sleep. I'll have low lights, and I'm married to somebody who loves bright lights. He said, "Why is it so dark in here?" And I said, "Well, I like the lounge to have low lights. So I only have on like one light, and it's a time for it to be soothing and calming and quiet. And then I'll go to bed, and then I'll listen to a yoga nidra meditation, but something that's going to wind me down so that my system is more ready to sleep." So that's some of the key points in my day. And along that, obviously, drink lots of water and get in my full helping of fruit, veg, and some good grains, so that I feel good about myself and my insides feel good too.
Fantastic. I love it. There's an element of stopping and smelling the flowers, that you're savoring every moment, because even when there's nothing to do, there is something that can be savored. Like you can appreciate the weather or appreciate what somebody else is wearing. There's beauty all around us. And I think sometimes when we get caught up in chaos that we forget that. So I like that you're, I guess it's also gratitude. It's gratitude for life and for this beautiful planet of ours.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing you notice when our heads are out of our phones, even briefly, we notice that it's very beautiful, that there is, as you said, there's beauty all around us. And sometimes we can just take that time to look at that. Maybe we smile at another human being. That's very powerful. But if our heads are always busy with our future or busy with all this feed that's coming at us, which is mainly negative because that's what sells, that isn't helping us to be more grounded and here. And being present is good for us in terms of our own physical and mental well-being.
And there's something else that I've taken away from our conversation, and that is when you were going through the menopausal transition and anxiety was a problem and you found mindfulness, mindfulness wasn't a Band-Aid. It wasn't something that you did one and done. It's something that you incorporated into your life, and it sounds like it's become a key part of who you are.
And I
Do you
think
agree?
that you've hit that on nail exactly on the head. I wasn't looking for something to fix my menopause. I'm sure that if I'd gone to my doctor and said I'm highly anxious, he would have prescribed an SSRI. That's not a criticism of a clinician. That's what a clinician does. I could have had a whole host of medication and walked away from there. But I didn't want to be fixed because I didn't think I was actually broken, but I knew that I had to change. And I think that's the insight that I gained. And mindfulness became who I was, not anything else. It's embedded in my life, even though I wouldn't say that I personally practice lots of mindfulness practices, because now it's who I am. But I can stop and I can think and I can say to myself, is that an appropriate thought even to have? Or is that a way that I should respond? Why am I responding the way? So it's given me insight into my own life, and that's the gift that it gives you.
Is it safe to assume that it also changed the conversation in your head? That maybe some of those conversations you were having with yourself might have gone from a more negative thought to a more positive, more compassionate, more self-love kind of conversation?
Yes, I think the sense that I didn't have to have a conversation that I wasn't good enough, that I was not as brilliant as all the people around me, or at least I was comparing my outside with my insides with their outsides, should I say. And of course, I didn't know the realities of what was going on in their lives, but I stopped that comparison and had kinder conversations that were less about me being a failure on a material level, and realizing that, I'm me, and that's fine. And I'm much kinder to myself. And being slower means that I'm more deliberate in what I do, what I choose to do, where I place my attention. And that a huge change for me. And I still have bad habits. I can look at my phone and my husband is talking to me, but he pulls me up and he says, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, sorry, it's me." So we all have mindless moments, and we all have times in our lives when we judge other people, or we are hard on ourselves, because we're human, and that's what our brain does. It's designed to keep us safe. And when you realize that, you can be more forgiving towards yourself.
So if we were to look at where you are now and where you were before, if you have a message to your fellow women, your perimenopausal women like myself, what would you tell us about the transition?
I would say that the transition requires you to give yourself space. You can't charge along this path. You're not on the same conveyor belt that you were before. You really can't sort of rush at the same pace. You're going through a huge fundamental change. I mean, it's huge on every level, and it's good to honor that. I would say surrender to some of the process without being a victim. You're not a victim of your symptoms, but you can surrender to this process. Allow yourself to potter and rest. And those things, and they feel very unnatural, but you will gain a tremendous amount. You can be reflective about yourself. And then as you start to emerge towards the end of your perimenopause and things are changing, a lot of your symptoms may ease off. You may be left at the end with maybe more of the weight gain and the hot flash thing, which tends to be more of the end of the process commonly for many women. But you may then start to be in a position where you can start to ask questions like, who am I and what do I want? Use this time, a reflective time, and try not to say, well, I need to be fixed and I want to be out of it and into the other phase, because generally what will happen is that you'll have to do that work again somewhere down the line. And it's a great time to use to set yourself up for the next 30 to 50 years. It's a very long time where we're going to be a postmenopausal woman. And we need to be prepared to go on another journey. So use the time well. Your body is helping you to make that transition, even though it doesn't feel like it.
I have seen that so many times. I'm so glad you've said that, because I kind of see it when I'm watching my patients is they're becoming version 2.0, and you need to go through that struggle, but you morph and you come out this beautiful butterfly at the other end, and you are such a better person after the process than before the process. And it's those lessons that you learn along the way. Now, I should be careful what I say because I've still got this in front of me. But I'm actually excited about it. I know that it's not going to be a smooth ride, and it hasn't been a particularly smooth ride so far. But I'm excited to think about the woman I'm going to be at the other end, and what life do I want for myself?
Yeah, that is the question. What do I want to do? And I think the thing I see now, because I talk to a lot of postmenopausal women as well in my podcast, as well as women who are going through it, and all of us have found, a new way to serve in the world. Our children are, if we have them, have grown up. We have maybe set new boundaries about what we want to do. Life changes, and women post-menopause are going out and doing amazing things. And I think to all your listeners, that opportunity is there for all of us. It doesn't all mean we're going to become a CEO or anything like that, but it does mean that each of us can make an impact in our world that can make it better. And I think women can do so much in a world that needs so much change. And postmenopausal women can be at the forefront of that.
I agree. You're evolving into the wise woman role, that you're really looking after the rest of the clan. So, yeah, thank you. So, Clarissa, did you want to tell my listeners about your work and how they can find you?
Yes, thank you, Jen. So my work is that I have a program called Thriving Through Menopause, which you can join. You can go to my website. I also have a podcast, and I encourage you to pop over and listen. It's different, maybe a bit different to Jen's podcast, where we have good conversations too about different aspects of people's lives. And if you're interested in mindfulness, then you can go to the breathworks.co.uk site, where I'm registered because I'm a certified breathworks practitioner through them. And there you could work with me or specifically on mindfulness if that is your interest. And I both do mindfulness for pain management and stress and anxiety. So there is lots of ways that you can find me and work with me, but my website is a good place to start if you want to connect. And that's ClarissaKristjansson.com.
And I will get the correct spelling and all the links from Clarissa and add them to the show notes to make sure you find the links if you're after them. Well, Clarissa, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a very different podcast for me, but one that I'm very excited about, and I'm sure my listeners will love it.
Thank you, Jen, for the opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Anxiety is unfortunately a really common symptom of the menopausal transition. Can I highly recommend that if you know someone who is struggling, share this episode with them. Let them know that they're not alone and that you care about them. And I hope to see you back here next week. Next week, I'm going to be talking about my all-time favorite menopause mineral. And if you're a long-term listener of the show, you'll know which one I mean. Okay, spoiler alert, magnesium. Next week, we're going to be looking at the various forms of magnesium, the various uses of magnesium. It is just my all-time favorite mineral, especially for women in the menopausal transition. So I look forward to your company next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Menopause Natural Solutions. This podcast contains general information about menopause. It is provided as a guide, and it is not intended to replace medical advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend.